Chapter 8 The Isle of Unemployed Bureaucrats. After swimming for nearly 2 hours in the tropical waters, Loriana reached the white coral sands of the atoll, where she collapsed and allowed her exhaustion to overtake her. She never lost consciousness, but rather gave in to an ethereal state where one's mind slips in and out of outlandish thinking, while still marginally tethered to reality. Although her reality was currently beyond anything her dreams could have devised. When she dredged up the wherewithal to take in her surroundings, she saw quite a few safety pods had breached themselves up and down the strand. Their occupants had, no doubt, been sedated by the pods, which wouldn't open until at least one person regained consciousness. It meant that Loriana would have to face their attackers alone. Then she saw a man approaching from the tree line, and she realized, to her absolute disgust, that he was a scythe. His robe was frayed, the hem torn, and although it clearly had begun as a lighter color, the closer it got to the ground, the darker and dirtier the robe was. She found herself more angry than frightened. To think that she, and all the others still in their pods, had survived the attack, only to be gleaned by a scythe upon the shore. Loriana forced her aching body upright and stood between the scythe and the pods. "Stay away from them," she said with more force than she thought she had in her. "Haven't you done enough? Do you need to glean the survivors too?" The scythe stopped in his tracks. He seemed taken aback.
"I have no such intention," he said. "I mean you no harm."
And although Loriana had seen silver linings in the darkest of clouds, she was rapidly jading. "Why should I believe that?" "He's telling the truth," said another voice, a woman coming out from the palm tree behind him. "If you mean us no harm, then why did you attack us?"
"We are the ones who stopped the attack. We didn't initiate it," said the scythe.
Then he turned to the woman.
"Or, more accurately, Munera here did. Credit where credit is due."
"If you want to help us, then go get some others," said Loriana, looking down the strand at the beached pods. "Because we're going to need more than just the two of you." "There are no others," Munera said. "Only us. Our plane was shot down. We're stranded here too." Well, that was just great, wasn't it? Did anyone know where they were? Well, the Thunderhead did, but not really. All it knew was that they had crossed out of its eye. Why couldn't Loriana just have listened to her parents and gone back to school for a new career path? Any career path that wouldn't have put her here.
"Tell us what you need us to do,"
said the scythe, calmly deferring to her. Loriana wasn't sure how to respond to that. No one ever looked to Loriana for leadership, much less someone like a scythe. She had always been more of a pleaser than a planner, happy to be at the business end of the finger that was delegating responsibility. But these were strange times, and this was a strange place. Maybe it was the right time to redefine herself. She took a deep breath and pointed at Munera. "Why don't you walk up and down the beach, count the pods, and check that they're all intact?" It would probably be a few hours before those within the pod regained consciousness. That would give Loriana time to get an idea of the scope of this situation. "And you," she said, pointing at the scythe, "I want you to tell me everything you can about this island, so we know what we've gotten ourselves into." Scythe Faraday was not surprised that to find this girl was a Nimbus agent sent by the Thunderhead. "Agent Loriana Barchok," she told him. "I was with the Fulcrum City A offices when we were given these coordinates without explanation, and so we came to find out why." Faraday told her who he was, figuring in the here and now it didn't matter who knew. She didn't bat an eye. Apparently, Nimbus agents were not aware of which scythes were supposed to be living or dead. He was amused, and perhaps a little bit insulted, that she did not recognize his name. Faraday followed her directions precisely. He told her what he knew of the island, but nothing of what he suspected of it. Because, to be honest, he and Munera had no proof that the failsafe was here. All they knew was that this had been some sort of military base in mortal days, and had then been used by the founding Scythes for purposes unknown. He showed Agent Barchok the smoldering remains of the defensive tower, proof that they had destroyed it. Then he took her down into the bunker.
We have sheltered here since we arrived. The weather has been mild, but in an area without thunderhead, winter intervention, I suspect storms could get out of hand.
She looked around, probably not sure what she was looking at, but then not even Faraday knew what most of the antiquated computers were for. Then she zeroed in on the steel door. "What's behind there?" she asked. Faraday sighed.
We don't know, he said, and since I'm sure you did not bring a Scythe's ring along with you, I doubt we're going to find out anytime soon.
She looked at him quizzically, and he decided it wasn't worth the effort to explain.
I must say, I'm surprised that you're even talking to me, being that you're a Nimbus agent, Faraday said. But I suppose rules of non-engagement do not apply outside of the Thunderhead's dominion.
They apply everywhere, but I didn't say I'm a Nimbus agent. I said I was a Nimbus agent, past tense. We all were. We're not anymore.
Is that so? Faraday said. Did you all resign?
Fired, she told him, by the Thunderhead.
All of you? How strange.
Faraday knew that the Thunderhead would occasionally suggest alternate life paths to those who were unfulfilled in their work, but it never outright fired people, certainly not enough people to fill a dozen vessels. Loriana pursed her lips. Clearly, there was something she wasn't saying, which made Faraday all the more curious. He said nothing and waited with that impatient patience that Scythes were so very good at. Finally, she spoke. How long have you been here on this island? She asked.
Not long in the grand scheme of things, Faraday told her. Just 6 weeks.
Then you don't know. There were few things that truly frightened Scythe Michael Faraday, but the prospect of an incalculable unknown was high on his list of personal fears, especially when it was presented in a particular tone of voice, the kind that usually preceded the phrase, "You'd better sit down."
Don't know what? He dared to ask.
Things have changed since you've got here, Loriana said.
For the better, I hope, Faraday said. Tell me, did Scythe Curie win her bid to become High Blade of Mid-America?
Agent Barchok pursed her lips again. I think you'd better sit down, she said. Munera did not like taking orders from this junior Nimbus agent, but she understood why Faraday had deferred to her. These were her people in the pods, so she would know best how to deal with them. And besides, Munera was aware that her own reaction was childish. This young woman, who had just survived a devastating trauma, needed a moment of control far more than Munera needed her pride pandered to. Munera counted 38 safety pods beached on the sands of the atoll. Not one of their ships had survived the attack. Bodies were already beginning to wash up on the shore, and in the tropical heat, the dead would quickly become non-viable. Even if rescue eventually came, there was no way to preserve them long enough to ship them out for revival, which meant that the dead would stay dead. They would have to be buried, or more likely burned, because they had no tools that could dig deep enough into the rocky atoll. What a mess. Problems would do nothing but compound. The atoll had no fresh water except for the rainwater they collected. The coconut palms and wild fruit trees provided enough sustenance for 2, but not for all these people packed within the pods. In no time at all, they'd be left with a diet of whatever they could bring in from the sea. Although, the girl didn't know why they were sent to these coordinates. Munera did. The Thunderhead had overheard Munera and Faraday plotting back when they were in the old Library of Congress. They had, inadvertently, made it aware of the blind spot, and the Thunderhead had sent these agents to find out what had been hidden from it. Late in the afternoon, the pods began to open as those within regained consciousness. Munera and Lorianda attended to the living, while Scythe Faraday ministered to the dead who washed ashore. He did so with loving care, treating them with the kind of honor and respect that a New Order Scythes did not. "He's one of the good ones," Lorianda said. "Many of them are," Munera told her, a bit irritated by Lorianda's assumption that good Scythes were hard to find. "They just don't insist on the spotlight the way the dishonorable ones do." Faraday seemed to be overwhelmed by grief as he tended to the dead Nimbus agents. Munera had yet to know the reason, so she just assumed it was his way. In total, 143 survived. Everyone was equally stunned by the turn of events that had landed them here, and at a loss on how to proceed.
"What is there to eat?"
they were already asking. "Whatever you can catch," Munera bluntly told them. None of them liked the sound of that. Lorianda found that keeping busy was the best way to avoid panicking at their current situation, and, in a vacuum of leadership, most people were willing to take direction from her, something they probably would have never done in the comfort of the AI offices. She supposed that people used to the bureaucracy found security in following directions. After all, she always had. But now, since Director Hilliard's pod had not yet opened, she was the one telling people where to be and what to do, and it tickled her that they listened. Or at least most of them did.
"On whose authority are you giving us orders?"
Agent Sikora asked. Was it evil of Lorianda to be disappointed that he had survived? Lorianda smiled warmly at him. "By the authority of that scythe over there," she said, pointing to Faraday, who was still collecting bodies. "Do you want to talk to him about it?" And since no one, not even Sikora, wanted to file a complaint with a scythe, he did what he was told. She organized them all into teams so that they could drag the pods farther from the beach and arrange them in such a way that they could serve as the walls of a shelter. They scavenged the suitcases and other debris that came ashore for clothes and toiletries and anything else that might be of use. Director Hilliard was one of the last to regain consciousness and was too dazed to assume a leadership role. "I've got things under control," Lorianda told her former boss. Fine, she said. "Just let me rest here for a while." Funny, but in spite of how dire their situation now was, Lorianda felt oddly fulfilled in a way she hadn't before. Her mother had said she needed to find her bliss. Who'd have thought it would be on the island in the middle of nowhere? "I am pleased to announce that the vault of relics and futures had been retrieved intact from the Endura wreckage. The founder's robes are undamaged and shall shortly begin a touring exhibit under the auspices of the Interaugural Museum of the Scythedom. The Scythe diamonds are all accounted for and have been divided evenly between all regions. Scythedoms that did not have a representative present at the salvage site may claim their portion of the diamonds by contacting the Amazonian Scythedom. I understand some regions have taken this position that their landmass or the size of their respective populations should entitle them to a larger portion of the diamonds. However, we in Amazonia stand by the decision to divide the gems equally. We do not wish to involve ourselves in any controversy and consider the matter closed. While I am personally leaving the site, there are numerous ships from various regions still at work salvaging the wreckage. I wish all those engaged in this solemn but necessary venture the best of luck. May the deep reward you with treasures and treasured memories of those we have lost. Respectfully, Honorable Scythe Sidney Posuelo of Amazonia, August 2nd, Year of the Cobra.